Good evening and welcome, one and all, to Pacific 414 episode review. I am your host, Mike, and tonight I am going to give a spoiler review for Chucky Season 2, Episode 4, Death on Denial. Now, with Death on Denial, we do get a recap of the last few episodes, and it basically culminates in us reuniting with Nika and Tiffany. So let me first bring to our first. Oh, I don't want to play the audio. But, anyways, it first opens up with this talk show setting where Chucky has his own show. And he's talking to the producer through the earpiece, and the producer and him are bickering back and forth because Chucky wanted some chocolate chip cookies with macadamia nuts. And then, of course, they go live, and Chucky starts giving a little bit of a recap of what's been going on. Let me go ahead and mute this way I don't get any claims or strikes. But he starts talking to the doll and says, Belle, what kind of role are you playing in this season? And then, of course, we get the first part of tonight's episode, Act 1. And, of course, this episode, it picks up where episode 2 left off, where you have Glenn and Glenda showing up at Jennifer Tilly's place, and Jennifer Tilly, aka Tiffany, is trying to clean up the blood from the slit throat of the detective from episode 2. And of course, the twins, Glenn and Glenda, ask her, is that blood on the floor? And she says, no, it's marmalade. And of course, Glenn here wants to. Sorry, this is Glenn. This is Glenda. And Glenda wants to put her coat in to the closet, and Jennifer Tilly, aka Tiffany, says, "No, I'll take that. I'll make sure that that's taken care of." And let me just fix my camera real quick. I don't know why it's doing that. So let me fix it. There we go. It should be fixed for now. And no, it's not. So you know what? I'm just gonna take myself off camera for right now. I don't know why that's doing that. But anyways, we have the meeting of the twins, and of course Tiffany, who's possessing the body of Jennifer Tilly. And we find out that it's Glenn and Glenda's birthday, and how there's a party being planned for the two of them. And of course, they end up asking Jennifer Tilly, who's possessed by Tiffany, what's going on? Are you doing okay as far as your finances are concerned? We've talked to your accountant, and he says that you're running out of money. So then we have a scene where Jennifer Tilly, aka Tiffany, is telling them everything's fine. And, she has plenty of finances. You have nothing to worry about. How are you two doing, considering you're, all wrapped up in yourselves? And of course, they mention that they're both dating the same person. And then we have this scene at the dining room table. And of course, they're eating meatballs. And the only reason we know that is because we see the meatballs on the plate, and it's actually mentioned that they're eating meatballs, where they continue to have their conversation. And of course, Jennifer Tilly is showing them her app for the security system she has inside the house. And of course, that security system is watching what's going on in Nika's room, where Nika is being held captive. So we have that going on. And then, of course, we have a scene where they're all talking. And of course, the twins have some concerns for Jennifer Tilly, because Jennifer Tilly is her mother Tiffany, and there are just some strange things going on. And of course, Glenn and Glenda also feel like they're separated, that they're not whole, that they've never been whole. They can remember a man who was being nice to them, and of course, the man also referring to them as shitface, which that man was Chucky. If you've ever seen Seed of Chucky, that's what he ends up calling Glenn. And of course, they have that conversation going on there. And in this conversation, there's of course this scene from Seed of Chucky where Glenda, sorry, I was about to say Glenn, but it's actually Glenda who's talking about it, says she feels like she's responsible for this death. And of course, Jennifer Tilly, aka Tiffany, says, "Oh, no, 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 it wasn't you. You had nothing to do with it. You know, it's just something of your imagination." And of course, Glenn, the other twin, is going upstairs, and she's trying to open the door where Nika's being held captive. And of course, the door is locked, and she's unable to do it. So Glenn is actually caught by Jennifer Tilly's home security officer named Jeeves. At least he's posing as Jeeves for this night, as he is posing as a butler for this little shindig that's going to be going on for Glenn and Glenda's 18th birthday. And Glenn ends up asking, "Why do you have a security guard?" And Jennifer Tilly says, "It's because you've been borrowing my shoes and taking them without asking." So then we have a new scene where we see a few celebrities. We have Joe from The Sopranos. We have a housewife, Beverly Hills housewife, Gina Gershon, and of course, Jennifer Tilly's actual real life sister, Meg Tilly. So they're there to help celebrate the twins' birthday, and they're having a conversation. And of course, that conversation goes to the fact that Jennifer Tilly, aka Tiffany, has been secluded in this house for over a year, and nobody has actually had any contact with her up until now. And that is something that the twins touched upon when they first arrived, and they were first questioning Jennifer Tilly, aka Tiffany, about her finances. And of course, everybody's saying, "You'll be fine, you'll be fine, you look great." It's this post-op type of thing. At least that's what Joe here says. And of course, that's where Jennifer Tilly rolls her eyes, because she says, "No, it's not that." And then of course we have Gina Gershon here saying, "I miss you. I miss seeing my love of my life." And then of course we have the reality star too. Like I said, from one of those housewives shows. I don't watch the housewives shows. I have no interest in those types of shows, to be perfectly honest with everybody. So we have that going on. And Jennifer Tilly still trying to say everything's all right, everything's all right. Of course, Gina Gershon doesn't believe it, and neither does Joe, or neither does her, the housewife. And so then she ends up leaving the room, and oops, and we get a commercial. So let me try to fast forward here if I can. All right. It's not going to let me fast forward. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that from the stream. And then when it comes back, I will go ahead and bring back what happens in the episode. So what ends up happening in the episode is there's a scene where Jeeves, the security guy, serves everybody some champagne. Everybody takes a glass of champagne and drinks it. Of course, there's just enough left for Jeeves. And then shortly after Jeeves has done what he needed to do by serving everybody a glass of champagne, he ends up actually dying. So let me go ahead and get to that scene. The commercial here is almost done. All right. And now we get to the next part of the episode. So as you can see here, I'll bring it back up. This is where Jeeves, quote unquote, has saved just enough champagne for himself. He starts asking everybody who wants some. And of course, everybody does. And of course, you see Jennifer Tilly coming down, and she's wearing this flashy dress. And she also overhears Jeeves talking to Glenn and Glenda because they are non binary. They identify as they and them. And of course, he starts saying, well, they and them is actually a plural, not a noun. And there's this whole thing about it. He's completely against it. And they're saying this is our identifying pronouns. And Gina Gershon tells him, come to the 21st century, you Neanderthal. And of course, we have an exchange between Meg Tilly and Jennifer Tilly here. And Meg Tilly is wondering why Jennifer hasn't been in contact with her for over 20 years. And, Jennifer says it's really nothing. Of course, Meg Tilly doesn't believe it. And then you see Jeeves, Joey, and the Beverly Hills housewife all at the piano. And of course, Jeeves is saying, weren't you, to Joey, on The Sopranos? And he says, yeah. And then he says, I really like the part where Tony Soprano killed you. So we have that exchange. Of course, Joey is also offended because Jeeves here is assuming that because Joe is part of the is Italian, that he's part of the Italian mafia. And he says, that's just a bad stereotype. Not all of us are members of the mafia. Could you please stop it? And of course, this is where Joe is getting on the nerves of Gina Gershon. And then he goes up to the housewife, and the housewife is actually catching his attention. And then we see Nika again, and she's overhearing the conversation from downstairs through the vent. And of course, meanwhile, downstairs, everybody's talking and they're having birthday cake because, again, it's Glenda and Glenn's birthday. And so everybody's having a piece of cake. And then, of course, we get to a scene where Jennifer Tilly is telling Jeeves to keep an eye on the door, don't let anybody pass through. So after Jennifer Tilly leaves, she comes back and you see that Jeeves is now dead. So she finds out that Jeeves is dead, and of course, she's snuck up from behind, and it's her own sister Meg sneaking up behind her. And of course, another reason why she's scared is because the power went out, and everybody's wondering what's going on. And you have the twins that are trapped in an elevator. And so Jennifer Tilly, again, remember, she's possessed by Tiffany, and says, "Oh, this is just a murder mystery." So it becomes Clue all of a sudden. You know, who killed Jeeves? And of course, everybody's, trying to find some clues. Gina Gershon actually pulls out Jeeves' wallet and reads off that he's part of the Topanga security office. And so everybody is now under the ruse that this is just a game of solving a murder mystery. It's a real life clue. Of course, we see this exterior shot right here with Glenda and Nika, and we'll get to that later. Let me try to. All right. All right. So, what I'll do is I'll just remove it, and after the commercial, I will bring it back up. But we have that going on. So, there's another mystery being solved. Why are the twins, more specifically in this case, when we see her, Glenda, trying to help Nika? Well, we do end up finding that out. Of course, before we can even find that out, let me try to get this to speed along here. This way I can show you some of the scenes from the episode. All right. Hopefully, after the State Farm commercial, I can show it to you. All right. Come on. This commercial's taking a while. Okay. So while these commercials are still playing, we get a little, hint of what's going on here and there, but nothing that really stands out and tells us exactly what's going on. Of course, as the episode goes on, we do find out what actually happened to Jeeves, but I'll wait till we get there. I've just got to wait for this commercial to finish up before I can actually show you some of the few other scenes leading up to some of the key parts of the episode. So as soon as this commercial ends, I will go ahead and bring it up. I'm just waiting for the commercial to end. Too many commercials, but that's what I get for DVRing this episode. Now, I'll be honest, watching this episode, had a few thoughts going through my head, and one of them was that the acting in this episode wasn't all that great. But, that's just a little nitpick. Okay, now we're back to the actual episode where they're all trying to figure out what happened to Jeeves. So we have that going on as they're talking in the living room, and they're trying to deduce what happened. Of course, Jennifer Tilly says she's in charge because she's the lead investigator and they're all her guests. So she also mentions that everybody's a suspect, including the twins, Glenn and Glenda. And then, of course, we get it back and forth between all the characters, saying, well, how could I be a suspect? How could she be a suspect? How could they be a suspect? And of course, we get a scene where Jennifer Tilly, remember, she's possessed by Tiffany, is actually looking for Nika, calling for Nika, and Nika is not in her room. Of course, Gina Gershon follows, and Gina Gershon says, it's been a while since we've been together. We need some nookie. That's pretty much what she says. Of course, Joe ends up walking in on the two of them, and he thinks it's some sort of crazy threesome. And Jennifer Tilly says, no, 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 no. You're getting the wrong idea. And then we get a scene with Glenn and Nika's being told by Glenn that she's going to help Nika get out of there. And, they just have to distract Jennifer Tilly in order to escape. So, all right, another commercial. So, as soon as I can get through this commercial, we can continue with the review of the episode. Okay, so now that we're back to the episode, see that we're in a new act. And of course, it's Jennifer Tilly, Glenn and Glenda. They're watching Liar Liar. And Jennifer Tilly is saying how Jim Carrey said that she was one of the better actresses he ever worked with. And of course, what the girls did is they actually ended up knocking out Jennifer Tilly, and then they start to go on their own little investigation as to what's going on. So there you see Glenda has a pen and a file, and she is picking the lock. And once they pick the lock, they find Nika. And of course, Nika's been there for over a year. And Nika says, "Are you here to rescue me?" And of course, they say, "Yes, we are." And of course, Nika calls Glenn, Glenda, and Glenda Glenn. And they correct her. And then we have this scene right here where Nika is talking to Glenda. And Glenn ends up leaving to keep an eye out for Jennifer Tilly. And then what ends up happening is Glenda actually cuts her finger and blood comes out of the finger, and that causes Chucky, at least the spirit of Chucky that's possessing a part of Nika, to come to the surface. Of course, that's where he says, "Hey, doll, I'm your father." And it's nice to see a kid. And of course, this is where Chucky, who's possessing Nika, calls Glenda shitface. And Glenda says, "What did you call me?" And Chucky says, "Shitface." Well, at least the Nika possessed says shitface. And of course, this is where we get the whole idea of why Chucky wanted the twins there so they can kill Tiffany. Of course, remember, Tiffany possesses the body of Jennifer Tilly. So Chucky wants Tiffany dead because Tiffany turned her back on him. So we have that, and Glenda promises to work with Chucky and get Chucky out of there. And then meanwhile, we have another scene later on where it's actually Glenn and Nika, and they're working on their escape plan. So they come to terms on their escape plan, which is something that they've actually been working on off and on. We come to find out off screen. Of course, this is a room that the security system isn't monitoring because Tiffany doesn't know about it. And of course, the power is restored. They come out of a secret door, just like in Clue, just like in any mystery. If you ever watch Scooby Doo or any mystery where there is a hidden door somewhere where, well, they come out of a hidden door. And of course, they start to make a run for it. And they go down the elevator. Nika sees the dead body of Joey. And that causes her to transform back into Chucky. And Chucky is very, very happy because Chucky has one goal. And everybody's staring as Nika possessed by Chucky, comes out of the elevator. And of course, Jennifer Tilly's not too happy because she knows it's Chucky, especially when he says, "Hi, Tiff." And then, of course, what happens, I'll bring it up as soon as this advertisement is over. But, anyways, what ends up happening is Nika ends up snapping out of it after a while and starts making a run for it via the wheelchair. And she gets to the front gate. Jennifer Tilly is trying to have the front gate close on her through the security system, and Nika gets out just in time. So let's go ahead and get to that there. Let me just go ahead and show you the scenes leading up to that. So before we even get to that, Chucky is holding up a gun to Jennifer Tilly. Now, remember, I know I keep saying this, but I know somebody just coming in will say, "Mike, that's not Chucky." No, it's not. But remember, part of Chucky's spirit is possessing Nika. So he is pointing the gun via Nika at Tiff, and he wants to kill her because killing Jennifer Tilly will kill Tiffany because Tiffany's spirit will have nowhere to go. And then Chucky actually gets hit, and that causes Nika to snap out of the trance. And there you see her making a run for it. And she keeps making a run for it. The twins start bickering. And as you see, Nika's going down the long driveway and she's trying to get out of the gate just in time. And of course, she's getting closer, closer. Jennifer Tilly is trying to activate the gate via her smartphone. And unfortunately for Jennifer Tilly, but fortunately for Nika, Nika gets out. And there you see Jennifer Tilly. Remember the possessed Jennifer Tilly going no. And you see Glenda following behind. We find out that it's actually Kyle in the driver's seat of the van. And we have Kyle, Nika, and Glenda speeding off in the van. And we have an emotional scene between everybody that's still back at the house. They're all thinking it was some sort of, mystery gag, you know, a detective story, a mystery story, an elaborate story. But nope, it wasn't. And then, of course, we get back to one of the few times we actually see Chucky, and he has WWE's women's star Liv Morgan. And of course, Liv Morgan is a big fan of the Child's Play movies, and at least that's what it makes you seem to believe in this episode. Now, whether she actually is, I don't know, because anymore, kayfabe is done in wrestling. But there's a conversation on this made up Chucky talk show, and Liv Morgan is talking and just gushing over Chucky, and we find out that there's some shenanigans that went on as far as what happened to Jeeves. He was drugged, overdosed, and then Chucky ends up bringing up the fact that on a podcast, Liv Morgan mentioned that she loves Chucky and she wanted to be killed by Chucky. Of course, we find out what happened to Joey. Gina Gershon actually pulls out a gun that she gifted to Glenn and Glenda for their birthday, and she ends up shooting Joey. That's how he ended up dead, because she thought that Joey was sleeping with Jennifer and that Jennifer might have been cheating on her. So we have that happening. And then, of course, we get back to the Chucky talk show. And this is where you see Glenda unwrapping the gift, which happens to be the gun. And of course, Gina Gershon was the one that gave it to the girls. And this is where Chucky and Liv Morgan are talking. And Chucky actually brings up the fact that Liv Morgan wanted to be killed by Chucky. And of course, Chucky says, let's have a hug because Liv Morgan even brings up the fact that Chucky likes to be hugged. So she puts Chucky on her lap, and then what does Chucky end up doing? And this is where she mentioned on a podcast whether this is real, whether this was just done for the show. I don't know. Don't really care. I'm just being perfectly honest. But this is where she says she wants to be killed by Chucky. So, she gets her wish. She's killed by Chucky. Chucky takes out the butcher knife and he stabs her. And of course, one of the things that Liv Morgan mentions before the episode ends is that for the series Chucky, they're only allowed to say the F word 10 times. So as Chucky is stabbing her, he's saying the F word 10 times. Yes, he's saying fuck 10 times. I'm only saying it once. And that's pretty much where the episode ends. We see that Liv Morgan is dead, and Chucky says, "Thank you for watching the show, and I hope you enjoyed it." Now, as far as whether this episode was enjoyable or not, well, honestly, if I compare to last week's episode, and kind of, I don't know why that's still doing that. Let me try to fix it yet again. Let's see how long that holds. Okay, it's not going to hold at all, apparently. So, going back to the avatar. But, anyways, if I compare last week's episode to this week's episode, I got to say, even though I gave last week's episode a 2.5, I might have to change that grade. I might have to change it to a 2.9 because honestly, I didn't think this episode was all that great. I watched this episode twice, and even the second time, I was still thinking to myself, this episode isn't that great. This episode is a bit of a letdown, and especially a letdown compared to where we were around episode 4 last season. So, if I were to give this episode a rating, I'd say it's a 2.5 out of 5. Not very good. And I think this episode really missed having Jake, Lexi, and Devin in it. I know you probably can't do every single episode in Incarnate Lore, but as far as I'm concerned, those are your two main stars of the show, and they should be in it. And they weren't in it at all. And there was very little Chucky in it. I mean, the show's called Chucky. You want to have Chucky in it more than just the beginning and near the end of the episode, at least in my opinion. So, you know, this episode, I'm sorry, but actually, I'm not sorry. This episode just wasn't very good. Just wasn't very good. And it's not one that I would actually go back and watch again because it's just not as good as some of the other episodes we got, especially in the latter part of season 1. So, my overall review was this was a mess of an episode, and the acting ability in this episode left a lot to be desired, especially in the beginning. And you need to have more Chucky. You can't just have it be Chucky, who's possessing the body of Nika or anyone else that he's possessing. No, it's got to be all Chucky. So that's my review. This wasn't a very good episode. Hopefully, next week's episode is a better episode. Let's see if Doll on Doll, that is the name of the episode, is a better episode than this week's episode. But we'll just have to wait till next Wednesday to find out. If you agree with me on this episode not being very good, cool. If you don't agree with me, cool. We all have our own preferences, our own opinions, and we don't always have to agree. But I do hope you enjoyed what you heard tonight during this review. And if you did, make sure to leave a like. And if you didn't like it, leave a dislike. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you like this or any of the other content that I have here on the channel. And share this out with anyone you know. I would greatly appreciate it. So, overall, this was a mess of an episode, kind of dragged on in a lot of parts, even with the mystery part, the murder mystery part, the clue type of murder mystery part. But overall, not a very good episode. 2.5 out of 5. So, thank you all for watching. Have yourselves a great night, and I will see you all later. And I do want to also thank the Nerdporial Life Form, Leia Rose, and Spock for coming by tonight. I really do appreciate it. So, thank you, and have yourselves a great night.